Yeah. Hey guys, all right, just before the show starts, I wanted to let you guys know that my fight against cancel culture is still happening. Please go to the description below. There's a link titled Support My Fight Against Cancel Culture. If you want to help my fight, please consider giving a bit of a donation. All the information's in that link. With that being said, enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Let's Talk. Tonight, I gotta be honest. First, let me say my guest tonight is Dioné Harley, or Dr. Dioné Harley. I'm going to call her Dioné because she's requested that for me to do that. And we're going to be talking about a very Dioné. I don't even know how to say this. Like, I want to say interesting, but it's going to come out wrong. I want to say like.
So,
It's a topic. It's a topic that is sweeping the world at the moment. There's been a lot of talk about it due to the movie Cuties, and it's brought a lot of this topic that we're going to talk about to the forefront. But first, let me also say that congratulations on your first successful show. Let's Get Real. I loved it, and next show is Monday, this coming Monday, next Monday, where you have, sorry, who is he?
Buddy Wells.
Buddy Wells. And what are you guys going to be talking about?
So we're going to talk about inequality in South Africa, and he has some ideas about how we need to go about alleviating inequality. And I'm not sure he and I agree, so we're going
Okay.
to have a conversation about that.
Awesome. All right, cool. So that's going to be right here on the Joe Show, ladies and gentlemen. Look for Let's Get Real. It is available on my YouTube channel. Just set a reminder, and I'm sure Yanni in a moment will put the link in this, like he always does. So thank you, Yanni, before you even get there, because I see him, he's here. All right, cool. So thank you all so much for joining. This is a delicate, that's the word I'm looking for, delicate
Right.
topic and conversation. Now, I'm going to state my view, and then you can give us yours. Because
Okay.
I, you said earlier you're not sure you and I are going to agree on this, which I find very interesting. So, okay, so this is my opinion. The question is, are we, and when I say we, I mean a society, human beings, a species, uh, across the board, all over the world, are we normalizing pedophilia? And in my personal opinion, it would seem that we are, due to various things. There's, the movie Cuties, which was out, and I did watch it, and I'll be giving a review on that very soon. But there are scenes in that movie that don't make sense to me from a creative point of view. There are You have this effect of social media and media itself where kids have access to certain sites, imagery, and there seems to be this not need, but no one is saying like to a girl, and I'll give you an example in a moment, but no one is saying to not a girl, but like children, you can't do that, or stop being like this, stop trying to grow up too quickly, you know. And I give you a very good example. My cousin, I used to work in a bar, and it actually caused a family feud because apparently when I was working at this bar, my cousin walked in and I told her to leave because she was underage, but I didn't know it was my cousin. I didn't know because I'm used to seeing her at family events nicely dressed, uh, you know, uh, properly presentable. And obviously, like when we're at the bar, she's dressed up to look older, and I had no idea. I tried to tell her that. Like I said, I had no idea. I remember the day. I remember who I was talking to. I was talking to one of her friends, and I said, "You guys have to go. You're underage," and I was apparently the uncool cousin now, and yeah, they couldn't believe I did that. But it's my point is like girls and kids and boys, they seem to want to grow up quicker, and no one is really putting rules in place, which I feel kind of influences other people to just tolerate it. And my problem with it is the effects this has, because there are, I don't want to call them sick people. I don't want to be rude to pedophilia because, or not pedophilia, but pedophiles, because there's another school of thought that think it's a sexual preference. But there are these people out there that do horrible things to kids. And I feel that we should be talking about that, and we should be saying to our children, there is a way to present yourself as you're growing up, and we need to protect them. And the way I feel society is going with movies like Cooties, even though the movie said it was trying to portray the effects of social media and society on children, I didn't feel it nailed it. I didn't. And I'll explain why in my review. But yeah, like movies like that and other imagery that we're seeing in social media and advertising all across the world, I feel are telling us like this, the way these children are presented is acceptable, and I just don't agree with it. So in that way, I think we are trying to normalize pedophilia. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so I also gave it a lot of thought and did a bit of research on the topic, especially this question of classifying it as a sexual orientation. And I have to say that as far as I can see, I'm not convinced that we are normalizing it. I think that just to pick up on your example, I'll go into more detail about the discussion around it being a sexual orientation. But to pick up on your example, consider the reaction to the movie being made, that people were calling for Netflix as a whole to be banned because they released that movie. I think the general reaction to that film was that it was absolutely unacceptable and that it caused such a hectic reaction. Netflix didn't even foresee such a reaction. Um, and that most of the commentary I've seen on it has been absolutely categorically against it. And I think that that is a sign that it's not tolerated. Um, and I also have some interesting questions I'd like us to explore regarding the film and whether the film like that should be banned and whether a film like that should be made. But we can get onto that later when you do your review. So yeah, so I don't know where you'd like us to start. I thought maybe we would start with this question of it being classified as a sexual orientation and what's meant by that, because I think people are getting the wrong idea about what that means, and so that's why they think it's being normalized as a result. So
Did you want to discuss the movie tonight?
yeah, no, I think it's an important thing to discuss,
Then
and I
we
think
can
it
discuss
raises a
it.
lot of interest.
We can discuss it. No worries.
Okay,
Do you want
yeah.
to start with the
So
movie, or do you want to start with the other one?
I, I just think let's start with definitions because I think let's just start there so we understand what the hell where the territory is, and then
Yeah.
we can move into the examples of it,
Okay.
and then we can go into the more interesting questions regarding that. So when I was doing this research on the classification of pedophilia, so it's interesting because there were two articles I found that I thought were quite instructive in terms of unpacking, quite a lot of detail what they mean by the definition, how it's changed, why it's changed. Now, it's still up for debate, so it's not a settled question. So that's that area of psychology, and I'm not a psychologist, so I can't speak to that debate because I'm not trained in that. So all I can do is look at what research is being published and say this is what they're saying now. And the starting point is that they still consider pedophilia to be a paraphilia, which is a disorder. It's abnormal sexual behavior. The reason why they're calling it a sexual orientation is because they want to say that it's not something that homosexuals or heterosexuals develop. It's not doesn't fall under those categories. So there used to be this superstition or this false belief that homosexuals are pedophiles, and that's often why homosexuals were ostracized, is because they were believed to be pedophiles. But the point of saying that it's a separate thing is what they're essentially saying is, even if you don't use the term, let's not use the term sexual orientation. Let's just say that it's a separate category of sexual attraction. Does that make it for you less offensive? That we would just say, look, it's a different kind of sexual attraction. It's still abnormal, but it doesn't fall under homosexuality or heterosexuality. It's a different classification. And if you put it that way, then I don't see why that's normalizing it. That's trying to understand it. And the reason why they've done that is because as they've now started to understand where does this develop, where does this abnormal behavior come from, they've started discovering that it's largely biological. It develops at the prenatal stage. So what they used to think was that it was the consequence of being abused. And so it was children who were abused themselves who developed this disorder. But now they're seeing there's not a lot of evidence for that. In fact, those children are way more likely to suffer from other problems like alcoholism and I can't remember now, but a whole bunch of other things that's like problems in their lives that have nothing to do with sexually abusing kids themselves. So if we then say that, look, the cause of this sexual attraction you have is biological, it's not a choice, it's something you're born with, then in that sense, what they're trying to say is that it's not something that you essentially can blame someone for just in virtue of the fact that they're born with that, because it's not something they have control over. And I have thought about this even before pedophilia became this hot topic. Like years and years ago, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about sexual fetishes, and we can be very judgmental about sexual fetishes that people have. And the reason why we think it's fine is obviously because, presumably, the people who seek out to satisfy that fetish would ask for consent from their partner. So it would be a consensual act. So that's why we tend to just go, you know what, it's your business. But we also can be very judgmental of people's fetishes, and that's the same thing. They're not choosing that. They're born with that fetish. It's not a choice. I'm sure if you ask them, they would choose not to have that fetish. So this understanding of the topic has given rise to an understanding of what they're now calling virtuous pedophiles. And those are pedophiles who don't act on their sexual urges. So they know that they are attracted to, and generally what we mean by that is prepubescent. So standardly it's considered so, it would be 13 years and younger. That's usually the age group we're talking about. But actually now the revisions, so I was looking at what are the revisions they want to add to this. So in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, it's this book in psychology that they revise every now and then as they start understanding different disorders. They're wanting to now actually revise it so that it includes more. So it used to just include the disorder as being sexual attraction to children 13 and younger. They now want to actually make it include children in puberty, so up to a certain age. They wanted to include that as well. And they also wanted to include watching pornography of kids of around those ages as a symptom of this disorder, which it also never used to be. So if you look at it that way, then in fact we're becoming actually more less permissive of pedophilia, because we're actually broadening the scope of the disorder and saying that it actually includes more than what we used to say it did. So in that context, it's not clear to me that we're in any way being permissive towards this disorder. We're trying to understand it, and we're trying to say that, look, you can't blame someone for being born with it because it's not a choice they had. The problem is that for the part where people get very upset is where you start defending or advocating for virtuous pedophiles. So to say, for example, I suppose things like if someone's a virtuous pedophile, they shouldn't be monitored, or we shouldn't.
Sorry, guys. Oh, there we go. Got you back.
So maybe allowing virtuous pedophiles certain freedoms would be going too far, because you're saying that. So yes, we understand that, look, they don't have control over the fact that they're pedophiles, but it is still too risky to allow them certain freedoms, because we don't know when they're going to transgress. And the the consequence of failing to stop them is that children will be harmed irreparably because they will be molested. So that's a tricky issue. Um, but again, it's not clear to me that we're not aware of it as something that we need to be wrestling with. So you and I were discussing, so what you were mentioning earlier is the rise of um, the sexualization of children. And I don't believe that to be tied to pedophilia. I think that that is just a separate phenomenon that pedophiles are benefiting from. And it's and also we actually don't we don't they don't actually know how many pedophiles there are. This is not something we've been able to actually track. So for all we know, all it's done is it's actually enabled people who had always been pedophiles. It's just given them the material that they've always needed because we have technology in play and because these things are circulating as much as they are. So that now pedophiles are essentially coming out of the woodwork. So the idea is that we are worried about pedophilia because we're seeing a rise of cases. But maybe we're only seeing the rise of cases not because there's suddenly more pedophilic acts, but because there's now the material to enable it. And the interesting thing I found is that what they always the assumption they always worked with was that we should shut down any content of children circulating because that is the thing that whets their appetite so that they actually go out and transgress. But what they actually found is that if they're watching those images, they've already transgressed. The reason why they're watching it is because the chances are very high that they've already molested a child. And that's why they're entertained by that sort of thing. So, but what I wanted to say about the sexualization of children, I think that that comes from a whole host of issues that have nothing to do with pedophilia and normalizing it. It has, if you look at the, like even just porn, the way that women's bodies are always hairless and look like prepubescent girls. I mean, that's been the case for many generations, where women have been seen to be more beautiful if they're hairless, if they look more like a young girl. Um, and even evolutionarily speaking, the idea of not a prepubescent, but a girl in her puberty is seen as the forbidden fruit. It's seen as in terms of her fertility, yeah. She's incredibly desirable. So there's a deep psychology there that has nothing to do with abnormal sexual behavior. And with children now, with what they're exposed to, when they're looking at in that movie, okay, I didn't see the movie, saw someone commenting on it, and I saw the script of what the storyline involves. So in that movie, when the main character, a big part of what she wants is to be part of this group. She wants to fit in, and she sees sexualizing herself as a way of doing that. So it has nothing to do with, let's say, someone grooming her to sexualize herself so that she, engages in all of those activities. It's her own need to fit in because she's in a very restricted culture, a culture that tells her that anything to do with her self-expression has to have its limits. And so she's testing those boundaries. And I take it that the point at the end of the film is that she comes to a healthy balance, that she's neither the girl who basically is completely covered and completely, restricted from expressing herself, but she's also not the girl who completely sexualizes herself at an age where she doesn't even know what that means. But that she finds the balance between those two things. I'm not saying it was well done because I've heard a lot of criticism of the film in terms of it being gratuitous, and we can talk about that. But what I'm saying is that I think the technological advances have given teenagers a tool with which they think they can achieve some kind of self-esteem, and it's become a
Sorry, guys. Let's get it back. Sorry, self-esteem. That's the last thing we heard.
and that for me is not the same issue as pedophilia. There's overlap, and there are ways in which they feed off each other. So obviously, like someone described cuties as a pedophile's dream come true. So sure, yes, I can imagine that when girls do those things and that content gets circulated, it can end up in someone's hands, and that could basically stimulate them to then watch it, circulate it, act on it, all of those things. But it's not clear to me that we are normalizing pedophilia as a result. If anything, we're not appreciating the impact that technology has on young children, and we haven't yet figured out how to curtail it so that they're not influenced in these ways.
Mm. All right, a lot to unpack there. I can see that some people are not happy in the chats, but we'll get to that in a moment. Look, let me just say this: Dioné is a very level-headed person, and she's looking at this from a philosophical point of view. That's her background, and look, in a scientific world, I can completely understand the want and need to understand why someone is attracted to children. And there should be research into that so we can understand it better, because human beings usually fear what we don't understand. I myself am curious to find out why individuals who are attracted to children, why they are the way they are. To call it a fetish, though, is for me personally. I can kind of level with that, but I think the issue here is you have weird fetishes out there. Let's be honest. Okay, there are I wouldn't say far worse fetishes, but there's some people are attracted to animals. That's a reality, unfortunately.
Yes, can't give consent. So that's also, it's horrific insofar as the thing is, the difference is that the reason why pedophilia is unacceptable is because the person that you're doing it with cannot give consent. So that's why I'm obviously against pedophilic advocacy groups that go around wanting to lower the age that children can have sex. Like in the Netherlands, they want to lower it to 12. Now, in the previous talk, we were talking about the trans movement, and I was saying that the reason why I disagree with it is because children cannot consent to something they don't understand the consequences of. And in the same way, obviously, you can't tell a 12-year-old they can give consent. I disagree with the fact that a 16-year-old can give consent for sex, because if your bar for consent for certain things is 21 and for other things is 18, why suddenly for sex is it 16? Like, there's no logic behind that. So if anything, that
Sorry, lost you again. You may need to repeat that. Hold on, getting you back. Sorry. If anything,
you have to keep that consistent. So the animal thing, I would think, is just as bad, because an animal can't give consent.
yes. Look, I'm not saying I agree with any of this stuff either. I'm just saying the reality is that there are some.
Neither of us do, but
Yeah.
we're trying to tease apart what are the things that make it unacceptable.
Yes.
And in this case, we're trying to also look at this movie, looking at it and thinking.
Sorry, guys.
And I don't think Cuties is an example of us normalizing pedophilia. I think it's a movie that went wrong. But the reaction I think illustrates the fact that we don't think that it's acceptable.
Well,
but anyway,
yeah. Before we get into the movie, I want to make something clear, and I want to try and understand a little bit more, because the scientific aspect of it is very important. Because I sent you a short documentary, which is what got this whole conversation going, which was a scientist who was trying to understand why pedophilias are the way they are. And there was an area in America where they actually, it's like a little reserved corner of a state where they just put all the pedophiles there. But they're also, like you said, virtual. What's the term you used?
pedophiles.
Yes, so they know, and they interview these people, and they know that what they're doing is wrong, and they're trying to not do it. There's like a group that speak to each other. It's almost like an AA kind of thing, and I don't. I'll be honest. I didn't like seeing that we throw certain people into a corner and kind of leave them to fend for themselves. I do think that we need to understand these people, and we need to be a little bit more. Like, I don't agree that you should just automatically kill someone because they're attracted to kids. Obviously, if they've abused in the past, and that's a different story, they need to be held accountable for that.
Yeah.
But if they haven't done anything yet, those are the ones that we need to speak to. We need to understand, and we need to see if there's some kind of. See, this is the part I think that is difficult for most people, because can there be a middle ground with this? I don't think there can be. So this is what makes it very complicated. Yes, okay, fine. You want to understand why these people are the way they are. I get that. But I think the problem people have is when you start understanding it, people fear that we're going to just be like, okay, well, now that I understand the way you are, and I understand how you feel, and I understand why you are the way you are, it's fine for you to be the way you are. So you can do what you want to do. I
Uh,
think I think that's the
yeah.
fear that
No,
people have.
no. I mean, look, I saw there was a rumor that went around that the LGBTQ community wanted to add P as one of their letters, and it was nonsense. They were not never considering something like that. But I think also the reason why people are worried about it is because like I mentioned to you, I was thinking about what are the values that we have as a society have adopted that would allow for that slippery slope where we feel that we're essentially trying to understand more and more conditions that once were considered um, marginalized or on the periphery, and that we basically just those people were ostracized and um, the two values that I see coming into play that have surfaced very powerfully in the West, that I think is the reason why people are so concerned, are tolerance and diversity.
Yes.
And I think that those two combined have created a very dangerous situation, where we can easily go into a slippery slope of accepting more and more to the point where we don't have any standards for what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Mm.
And it's driven by this need to embrace diversity for diversity's sake, which I think is a mistake. Um, and also this need to tolerate whatever comes into our purview. So I'll give you an example. So when I teach first year students philosophy, we teach them ethics, and one of the ethical theories we teach them is moral relativism. And according to moral relativism, the rightness or wrongness of an act is a function of the culture that you find yourself in. So essentially, if that culture says that it's right, then it is right. Okay. So on that basis, you don't have an objective standard from which you can say that one thing is right and another is wrong, because it's completely dependent on it's relative to the culture you're in. So then generally students, when they come into first year, they're young, they want to seem like they're accepting of all these different views, and they want to come across as if they're all cool and tolerant, and like anything goes, and they're experimenting. And so they tend to react to this moral theory by saying, no, of course that's right, no, yeah, that's totally how it is, like, yeah, that's the one. Until I say to them, okay, but then based on what you're telling me, what Hitler did was fine, because it was fine according to his culture. In his cultural system, what he did was acceptable. So we can't say Hitler was wrong. At which point, obviously, they usually will just backtrack very quickly and say, no, of course, what Hitler did was wrong. It's like, well, okay, but then you can't say that unless then you're not a moral relativist. Because the only reason you can say that is because you think there are objective moral standards.
Mm. And I
Um,
think, sorry,
so
because I think I'm gonna bring this up now. Because
Okay.
that goes in hand with the effects of what happened after the movie. The society having an opinion on the movie and telling us what society feels. And yes, I saw a comment earlier by SEZA who said something. Let me just find it quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry. It was something about Hollywood. Yeah, here it is. So when we talk about the outrage that happened with the movie, he said yes, but only the conservative people were calling for Netflix to cancel the film. It is clearly tolerated, as you just mentioned, by the media and the left, including Hollywood. So that's the tolerance problem that you're talking about. And my point here is, and to your point as well, um, let's society told us. I think there was a bigger outrage than the of people saying this movie needs to be canceled. You cancel Netflix. This is a terrible movie. It was rated the lowest. It had the lowest rating on IMDb, and IMDb has a crap ton. Every single movie you could possibly think of is on IMDb, and it had the lowest rating ever. And that's where I agree with
Look,
you.
I didn't see anyone defending this film. I'm sorry, I didn't
I
see
did.
any comments of people saying that this was okay.
I did. I read some reviews that were defending the movie. In France, it was highly revered. In France, it won awards. The director
Oh,
won
really?
an award. Yeah, I did a bit of research on the movie, unfortunately.
To that question, I also have some questions around that, but we'll get to that in a
Yeah.
bit.
So
Um,
my point here is that France seemed to like the movie. Okay, I don't want to generalize and say all French people like the movie, but the director won awards and it won award another award at the Sundance and stuff like that. There were a few reviews that were defending it because it was saying that the movie was supposed to portray or show the effects of social media and pop culture on children. Again, in my review, I'll go into detail about that. But what I want to touch on here is, like you said, now the society having a say in something and giving its
yeah,
opinion, and society definitely, beyond a doubt, disagreed with this movie, and we can dissect, scenes. Oh, I didn't. You're back with me.
yeah.
We can dissect scenes and we can dissect dialogue and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, nobody, I would say at least 90% of the globe, maybe 80, did not like that movie. And that does give me hope in our society. And I can see how you can, or I can see your point of, your stance on this when you say we're not normalizing it because this movie came out and there was a big roar against it. Like there was a big attack against the movie.
Absolutely. I mean, so intense that they were saying Netflix needs to be shut down. I mean, that's about as intense as it gets. It's to say that literally this live stream service that everyone has loved since it's come out should shut its doors because of one film. That's about as extreme as you can be. So, I mean, in any case, when people, so I'm actually just trying to kind of play devil's advocate and see why people are fearing that this could be a reality. But at the end of the day, I'm also going to call into question people saying things like, well, clearly people are accepting it. Well, clearly what? Who are these people? What are these statistics? What are these numbers of people accepting it? If you don't have the evidence, then we can't make a claim like that. That's a pretty extreme claim to make to say that we are normalizing pedophilia. I'm going to need a bit more than, well, clearly we are. That's not evidence. I need evidence. And the one instance we're talking about, I don't see evidence of that. I see, in fact, the opposite, that we're railing against it. And everyone's bringing up, which is why I dealt with that, everyone's bringing up the fact that it's now labeled a sexual orientation. But I'm trying to explain to the audience what that means. And all it means is that it's a separate sexual classification because they're basically saying it's not something that.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, it's
It's not
not.
something that it's not something that homosexuals or heterosexuals are likely to engage in because it is an abnormal form of sexual behavior. And as far as I can see, insofar as they're also trying to expand its definition and what it covers, that also goes against the idea that we're normalizing it because they're actually trying to make it more inclusive in terms of what its reach is.
Mm.
So that's why I'm saying that if we want to, I can understand the concern, as I say, because I think that with the values we've embraced or that the West has embraced, diversity and tolerance, we've opened up a floodgate. And I think people are concerned about what are the criteria we're using to discern when we're going to basically, create the standards, make calls on what's acceptable and what is not acceptable.
Mm.
I think that for some people, even the LGBTQ movement, a lot of what's been allowed to come in has been too hard to tolerate. So, like you and I have had the conversations around what the trans movement is doing in terms of advocating for children to have their sexual transitions occur while they're in puberty. I mean, things like that. Those are the kinds of things where people go, okay, but now we've gone so far in terms of our tolerance that we're allowing things to happen that really are not okay because children can't give consent. And I think that's where the concern around pedophilia comes in because we're seeing children become more and more sexualized. And the concern now is, are we as a, I think this is the bigger question we need to ask ourselves. Are we as a society playing a part in grooming young children to be ripe for the picking because of the role that technology is playing in their ability to sexualize themselves? Because they're looking at content they shouldn't be looking at. They see this content as currency into social groups, ways of being cool, ways of being grown up, and that makes them literally they are generating the content that pedophiles feed off of. So I think the bigger concern we have at the moment is how are we going to curtail the way that technology is used when it comes to children of that age? How do we educate them about these things? I actually read up on schools in the UK and children, teachers who are becoming so concerned about the way that their students were already being sexualized and sexually engaging on social media and things like that, that they were saying that we need to bring that into the education curriculum. We need to start engaging with these topics because these children have no idea what they're engaging with. They are incredibly vulnerable. And that's how, if we're just taking cuties at face value, that's how things like.
Sorry, guys. That's how. Sorry.
And that's how, yeah, I was just saying that's how we find the girls in cuties doing the nonsense that they're doing just so that they can be cool, just so that they can be grown up and be like the women they see in the videos. Doing those things that they think are cool. They have no idea what it means. I mean, they're doing the moves. You can see how they're doing the moves. They don't even understand what it means. But they just think that that's what they're supposed to do because they see the girls that are beautiful and that are desired and that are famous doing it.
Mm.
So actually, that I think is a bigger concern for our society at the moment.
Yes, and I agree with that. However, okay, so I'm not gonna like criticize you for this because you haven't seen the movie, but in my opinion, what you spoke about now, technology affecting children and stuff like that, is supposedly what that movie is supposed to bring across. Everything you just spoke about now, in my opinion, it didn't. It missed the mark.
Okay.
Purely because at the end of the movie, I'm left confused. I didn't see. Usually with a message like that, you have a hero's journey, and
Yeah.
and there's a clear moment where a hero decides to do the right thing. Because if they don't, there's a consequence,
Yes.
and there
Yeah.
isn't that. It's very weak. It's at best. You have to watch it to understand, but it is the weakest ending I've ever seen in a movie ever.
Oh,
And it
okay.
left me confused. Yanni van der Valt, who's in the chat at the moment, also watched the movie with me, and we discussed this. I asked him, "What did you think of the ending?" He said, "I was confused. I don't know what to think. I'm just disturbed by what I saw." And I agree with him. I said, and here's the funny thing that I found out about this movie as well. The director, in order to prepare for the movie, interviewed a lot of girls to get
Yes.
material for the movie and write a script. I would have rather seen those interviews than watch a movie that was created like that. I think that would have had more impact on the message of what they were trying to portray. So
Yes.
when there's that option and you
Mm.
decide to make a movie like that, that's where I think the intention now is being questioned with a movie like that. Now, and that's my gripe with the movie. But again, I'll go back to unfortunately, if you want my honest opinion, it is a necessary evil that we needed in this world. And what I mean by that is, like we just discussed, because the movie was released, we saw outrage, which gave me hope that humanity isn't lost because we still have a a a moral type of there's morality in our humanity, and I, I I I cannot justify taking down that movie purely because I think that it's a form of art, and there's been a lot of disturbing pieces of art in this world, and it's those forms of art that remind us where our limitations are as human beings.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the other part I wanted to say. Look, I accept that the movie may have been poorly done and that it had gratuitous. I mean, I have a friend who watched it and he said he couldn't get through those scenes because it disturbed him so much. That because it was gratuitous, because the way it was shot was just unnecessary. It didn't have to be shot in such a sexual manner
Yes.
so that it essentially served as, a pedophile's wet dream. But at the end of the day, like you say, I also believe in artistic freedom and I believe in artistic expression. And there are many, many forms of art that were banned when they were released. And it's only because we later realized that they shouldn't have been banned because they drew attention to very important issues that they got back into. So Lady Chatterley's Lover, for example, at its time, it was banned. Um, Lolita was banned. And Lolita is about pedophilia. Now, okay, here's the difference though. Pedophilia is a book. So that is, you're not taking an 11-year-old child and actually, like in this film, where they actually had to perform those moves. And they were actually sexualized because they were shot in that way. It was a book, so you could write the book. But in the book still, it was, yes, the whole point of the book was that you felt sympathy for the main character, and you do, but you're also disgusted with yourself or feel sympathy for him because you know he's a pedophile. And that was the point of the novel, was to draw attention to that reality. Um, so in this case, like you said, I've seen scenes, but I haven't seen all of it in the whole movie. So I can accept that it was a poor piece of art and it did what it was trying to do poorly. But at the end of the day, I it is drawing a, if she's being honest about if the director's being honest about her intentions, that is an issue in our society. That really is something that we are struggling with. Um, and so again, what most people will also say is that we're here talking about it, and we're talking about it a lot more than we did before this film. So in that sense, yeah, it's terrible, but
Yeah,
it serves a purpose.
that's why I justify, not
Yeah.
justify. That's why I don't want it to be taken down because it serves as a reminder. Let me say I don't agree with the movie. I don't like it. I was very uncomfortable. It got progressively worse as the movie went on. There are other
Yeah.
aspects of the movie that I question, such as artistic decisions and stuff like that. And yeah, but again, I look at the results, and while the movie was terrible, absolutely terrible, it got us talking, like you just said, and I think that is important because we're talking about, like I said, a sensitive topic at the moment, and we're talking about something that I saw Queen Wordsmith said. Check out the hashtag Save Our Children. It's brought in certain aspects of our society to the forefront,
Mm, mm,
and it's causing us to talk about this issue and understand it a bit more. Now, when we talk about normalizing pedophilia, I think this is where people just get a bit uncomfortable because it is, in a way, and I've seen this argument as well. In a way, you made a movie that's supposed to create attention to, again, pop culture and social media and the effects it has on children by showing the very thing that you're trying to criticize.
Yeah.
And it's kind of contradictory. And I agree with that statement because it's the final scene that is really not the final scene, but it's the final dance that really is a bit too much. It's
Joe, consider this. This is something I was just thinking about. Consider this though. I'm not saying this was her intent, but I'm saying you could see it this way. Okay? If people are so desensitized to the sexualization of children, they're so used to seeing it, they're so comfortable with it. What would it take to shock someone like that out of that state, so that they are made so uncomfortable with what they're watching that they realize that the sexualization of children is that wrong? So the film, by being that gratuitous, for all we know, could have shocked people who had become so desensitized to it, could have shocked them into realizing this, making them so uncomfortable with what they were watching, as Lolita made me, as when I was reading it, that you were literally realizing, oh my God, like I have actually become so used to this that I didn't even realize how wrong this was. And because of the scene, I can now see it's that extreme.
I
Like
think
we crossed a line.
yeah, but I think it could have been done a different way. Again, I question the artistic decisions that were made in that movie, and there's a lot of questions I have. Which is why I bring it back to if the director had interviews with these children, that would have been like there's a new documentary now on Netflix. I think it's called Social. Someone help me out in the chats. It's Social something. Yes,
Social
the Social
dilemma.
Dilemma. Yeah, if
I
it
saw
was
that.
done in that way, we have
Yeah.
interviews and experts and people talking about this, giving statistics and stuff like that, that would have been more impactful. If you've seen
Yeah. Yeah.
don't f with cats, if you've seen Making a Murderer, all these hard hitting documentaries. There's one about the I forget his name, and I feel so bad that I forget his name. But it was a young boy that was jailed wrongly in America, and it was the documentary was made to show the flaws of the American system, and that was very impactful because the guy or the boy ended up killing himself when he was released, because he was wrongfully jailed and he was abused heavily during his time in jail. That was a lot more impactful than making a movie that,
Yeah.
in a way, does promote sexualization of kids. And here's my thing as well, and this is something that people think about, and I agree with it. When you're in the movie industry, when you're making a movie, you have to tell someone, cut, repeat, cut, repeat, cut, another take, another take, another take. So you're making these kids do it over and over and over and over and over. And that, to some extent, would be considered abuse.
Yes, no, 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 I agree very much with that, because that is where I think, again, we have to consider what the film, in virtue of its making, what it was doing. And that's why I compared it to books. In books, you're writing a story, you're not actually making someone do that. In this case, you are actually making 11-year-olds perform and be sexualized in that manner. And that, yes, that could be crossing a line.
So now, if that's crossing a line, is it art?
I don't know, dude. This is one of those cases where I
Queen
just don't know.
Wordsmith says, that's not art. I am saying this with my chest. Art does not sexualize kids. And I gotta say, I agree with her on that.
Yeah. No,
I
I
agree with
don't
her.
know. But I mean, like we said, look, I don't condone it either, but I also think that the fact that, like you say, the fact that we saw the backlash we did, for me, indicates that we haven't normalized it. I think that's a good thing. Um, and the fact that it has gotten us talking about the issues around that, I think is important. Now, the question of whether those balance out, I have no idea. I don't know. Mm.
Well, yeah, well, again, this is the philosophical question. So I don't know if you and I will come to a
Well,
final.
I think what our topic is whether we're normalizing pedophilia, and I think you agree with me now that we aren't. Otherwise, I need to see evidence. I need to see what is it you're pointing to as evidence for that we are. Because as far as I can tell, I'm not seeing something in our society that is crossing that line where people are suddenly, in general, accepting.
I again, I understand what you again that there was something that I knew was going to be touchy for people in my review when I stated that this does need to be in existence because it helps us. It's a reminder of where our limitations are as a society, and
Yeah.
I am very happy to see the outrage. Absolutely. By all means, I've always said if you don't like my comedy, I want people to tell me. And if I do something that is really outrageous and unacceptable, I want my audience to tell me because as an artist, that will tell me. I think the method that was done to make this movie was wrong. And again,
Mm.
I always question that artistic decision,
Yes.
which in a sense, what Queen said makes me then question. Okay, cool. In order for this movie to be developed and made, certain things had to be done, and I don't know if I can accept it now as an art. And to say now this movie is out there, there are other things in society that we've discussed now that, um, yeah, can maybe. I think I'm just scared. I'm scared. If I'm honest, I'm scared. I don't have a kid, but I know people who have kids,
Yeah.
and I imagine that anyone watching this right now with a kid is just unacceptable. And I
Yeah.
can completely level with that.
Yes.
It's just
Absolutely.
purely unacceptable because if I had a child and something terrible happened to that child, like molestation, and I'm not saying this is the case, but let's just say, for example, we were in court and the guy said, "Oh, I watched Cuties and I wanted to make it my reality."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the fear. That's that, and I can completely agree with that. And yeah, maybe now after this discussion, I'm leaning more towards take the damn movie down. I don't know,
Yeah.
but normalizing normalizing pedophilia to answer the question. There's a part of me. I think it, like you said, it has to do with the tolerance levels that certain people keep saying we need to be more tolerant. We need to be more tolerant. I do think that we do need to look at our technology that has given access to children, or sorry, gives children access to certain things and imagery. Um, Parents need to be a lot more responsible, and the movie does touch a little bit on that. It's I think morally, I have to say yes. I feel like that movie, because of those artistic decisions, which when you watch the
Mm.
movie you might understand. Again, that movie didn't have a clear ending for me. There is no consequence. There is no moral ending, so to speak. It ended the way you predicted. By the way, I don't. You haven't seen the movie, but it ended the way you predicted. Like she's seen in a proper attire, and then she goes outside into the street and she starts skip rope jumping or whatever you call it with the other
Yeah.
kids, almost as if to say she's now decided to become conservative and be a kid. It's a very bad Pinocchio story, is what I'm trying to say, because she wants to be part of she wants to be a real girl, she wants to be a grown up, and she kind of just eventually realizes that she needs to be uh, not conservative, but she needs to be a girl. She needs to be a normal girl that plays with her friends and stuff like that. But there is no consequence. There is nothing in that movie that states or shows a real change. And if at best all that movie does is tell me that my kid is just going through a phase. So if I see my kid gyrating and twerking, It's just a phase. That's
Yeah.
the message I get, and that's the problem. That's why I think it
I
is
thought
heavy.
the consequence was supposed to be when they get booed off the stage because they do their little performance thing and then
It's
like she starts
it's
crying or something and she runs
yeah. She
off
starts crying, but again,
and
that scene is
I thought
not
that was supposed to be
the the movements that they are doing, and the that scene is very hard to watch. Very,
yeah.
very, very hard to watch. And yes, they are booing, but it's not impactful enough. It's just the way it happens is they're dancing and doing terrible things, and all of a sudden she hears the booing. She stops with her back towards the audience, starts crying, yes, and then she sees confetti, which is supposed to be a symbol of family because she fell in confetti earlier on in the movie, and that's it. And then she runs back home and she leaves the dance, and that's it. Like she's almost like, I'm leaving this behind my life. That wasn't a big enough consequence for me. It didn't. I was left confused. I was left like, what? No, this isn't. And there's a lot of aspects of the movie that they say when you read it. We show like the girl's influence from environmental influence, from social media and all that stuff. Again, it's like there's no in depth journey, if I can put it
yeah.
that way. It's just glimpsed over.
Okay. Yeah, no, well then it's
Yeah.
yeah, no, then it's
So,
just
for
sort of
example, there's a scene where she's watching a older music video with older women, half naked, almost stripper like, and that little scene, it's like not even 10 seconds, 15 seconds, is supposed to now justify her actions for the rest of the movie, along with other aspects.
yeah, no.
Her parents having a problem in their lives and stuff like that, and all this other stuff. But that's supposed to justify a moment when
Yeah.
she stole her father's phone. Her father finds out, takes the
I
phone, and then she undresses.
I
That
read
little scene is supposed to justify that.
yeah,
The movie is sloppy at best. It does not at
yeah,
all come across, and the problem is also the dances are more. I want to say more powerful. They're just more impactful, and they're impactful because they're uncomfortable.
yeah.
And there's a scene that I question very much because there's a scene where they're rehearsing on stairs, doing
Oh, I saw a clip of that where they're
yes.
on the stage.
That scene did not need to be in the movie. It makes no value at all to the movie. You can take that scene completely out, and it would have no effect on the movie. I'm
Yeah.
basically giving my review right now, but 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 there's a lot. Again, there's a lot in that movie that I don't agree with, and which is why, to Queen's point, maybe it's not art. Maybe it's just this, and I can
I mean,
see
look, but again, to play devil's advocate, how many times has there been gratuitous violence, gratuitous language, gratuitous? I mean, Marilyn Manson, like there've been so many phases in our society where artists and their work was completely condemned as not being art because of the impact it was having. And as time passed, we've pushed back against those things. It's not to condone this, I'm not condoning it, but I'm saying that we go through these periods of development. And in this case, yes, it's something that is incredibly uncomfortable and horrifying. Um, but at the end of the day, bad art or sloppy art is it's still not clear to me that it's not an instance of art. It's something that is done poorly. But again, it has us talking about this in a way that consider if it hadn't been made and we weren't actually confronting this. Look, I mean, it's not that simple, right? We can't ever weigh out the good things and the bad things that will be consequences of this film being made. Um, but I think that, like you and I have done, the one positive thing about it is that I don't think, given the reaction, I don't think that we're as far gone as we sometimes fear that we are. And I know that people are concerned about the tolerance of the West, and what the ultimate outcome of that's going to look like. But you also said, this movie was the only place where it was well received was in France.
Yeah.
So not in the West, not in Hollywood, in France.
Mm.
So again, I don't see any evidence to suggest that we need to lose our senses and think that now
But
we're
this is
condoning this as a society.
maybe this is the discussion that needs to be had as well. Is it art? Is it an art? And I think
Yeah,
I'm seeing a lot of comments in the live chat saying it's not. And you know what? At the end of the day, I've always said this again. Um, as an artist, my audience decides my fate. No one else. I perform stand-up comedy for the audience, not for fellow comedians, not for a director, not for anyone but who comes and pays to watch my art. And if one day comes where they're not coming, where people aren't coming, they've spoken, and I'm no longer an
yeah,
artist.
yeah,
So I want the outrage to continue. It should. I absolutely flippin' should.
yeah.
Going back to, are we normalizing pedophilia? I think you and I, DNA, are going to be. I understand where you're coming from a scientific point of view, a philosophical point of view, and I can concede to some of the not arguments but points that you've brought tonight, and I can totally understand that we need to understand these people, um, and I think the problem here is, again, once you understand something, doesn't mean we have to accept it.
Yeah, but I'm
And
not saying,
I know
and
you're
I,
not.
but it,
I know you're not saying that. Sorry, I misspoke. I'm not saying that you're saying that. I'm just saying that from. I think some people view it that way, and
mm,
the thing is, if you don't attempt to understand it, we don't know if there is a solid yes or no to accept it. We need to understand it. I agree with that 100%. Um, Obviously, I don't think there is a situation where we will accept pedophilia. I think our moral, like you said earlier, the society and its morality will always be against it, hopefully. Um, there are bigger issues such as tech and all that stuff that are creating bigger problems for our children. Um,
parenting, um,
yeah.
proper parenting. I think we don't have a handle on how to parent in an age where there's technology that's available as freely as it is. It's very difficult.
Yeah. In my view, I think that piece of art is trying to almost normalize it because, again, the ending, it didn't sit well with me. Maybe you should watch it and you might have a different view, but I looked at it from a
Yeah,
very artistic point of view, and I was critiquing everything. I made notes, which are out in front of me right now. I was pausing the movie, making notes, and questioning every scene and every artistic decision that that movie made, that the director made. And I personally, if I wanted to talk about this type of topic, I would have made a documentary rather than a movie that shows these kind of images. So for me, because they made a choice to make a movie, it is very dangerous territory to be in. And
yeah.
movies are influential. Movies are influential. So it's like telling a story. You know, back in the day when there was tribes and stuff like that, before we had technology, they tell stories of legends and stuff like that. That's influential. Some of
I
them
know.
had morals, and
So,
some,
but again,
yeah,
consider the fact that they wanted to ban. They didn't want the Joker movie to come out when it did because they were worried that there was going to be violence as a result, and nothing happened. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, films are very much influential, but at the end of the day, to also ban things because of the perceived consequences, what you think the consequences might not be the consequences. And the moment that you start limiting something like art, again, you have to consider the slippery slope in the other direction of starting to ban things and where you start drawing the line there.
Yeah, this is a very, very sensitive and difficult decision. I know that everyone watching has their opinions and they are fully justified to have those opinions. I know that Queen is a mother, and I can, like I said, I can understand her disdain with the movie, as with Yanni and everybody else that I've spoken to. And that's the thing, like we said earlier, like most people don't like it. I think 90, like most people I've spoken to, they don't like it. There are the ones that say, yeah, but it's not as bad. Sorry, it's not as bad as people think. And yes, I will say that I expected a little. The way the media and other people were talking about it, I expected it to be way worse. But it was still terrible. It was still uncomfortable. It was still unacceptable. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it's very difficult for me to say that this piece of art isn't trying to, um, in my opinion, normalize this behavior. Because again, you had like in that movie, you had certain scenes that
Yeah.
it's yeah. Again, like it's. But I hear what you're saying. I think what I'm trying to say is it was an attempt to make something. It was a bad art. Um, did the director do it with the intention to normalize pedophilia? I don't know. I pray to God, no, that that wasn't that director's intent. The director said that their intent was to show the effects of social media and all that stuff on children. I think he failed on the mark, or she failed on the mark. I don't know if it's a he or she, but I think that they failed to do that. So yeah, and unfortunately, this is out there, and I think the people have spoken that it's not an art. It's not, and that's they're the ones that have the decision to make that. They're the ones that can decide that. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily saying that we should. I mean, there are people that are saying that we should take it down and we should get rid of it. Um, I think you can say that it's not art without getting rid of it, um, because again, the existence of this film has brought us to talking about certain things in this world. I can see in the chats that certain things were brought up, like hashtag save the children. If you are watching this and you don't know what that is, go look at it. And again, the more people that know about this stuff, the better. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's. I just can't get away from the idea that society is going, or I get what you're saying. Society spoke out about this movie, but there are other things that are not related to this movie that are happening that may lead to desensitizing of pedophilia.
I
Um,
mean, look, one thing I wanted to mention that I think maybe something we could also talk about if we want to consider other ways. I think we need to move away from this movie because it's not the only thing out there that we can use as evidence for this. I think it's actually not even going to feature as a blip on our radar in terms of evidence. But if you consider, like I was talking about porn, how for the longest time women have been featuring as and being made to look as often as possible as prepubescent girls. If you look at the rise of androgyny as a look, so if you look at models looking more and more androgynous, which is often have the bodies like children do, no hips, no breasts, like incredibly, you can't actually tell whether they're male or female. And I think those might be ways in which we're actually masking pedophilia, where it's actually out in the open and we're not calling it that. Because again, we don't actually know how many pedophiles there are. We don't know what the number is. So there could be way more than we've ever imagined.
mm,
And these could all be ways in which our society has become desensitized to that.
mm.
So I think it's actually more interesting to look beyond this film and look at what are the other aspects of our society where those things might show up.
Okay, well,
And
here's a good question from the audience. Again, Queen Wordsmith asking, Can the doctor please mention child sex toys or dolls? Maybe that's also.
That's a good one. That's a very good one because this also brings up the idea that so they're being so, but sex dolls in general, the quality of them is increasing, and the variety is also increasing. So we now have, as she mentions, we now have sex dolls where they look like children, and pedophiles can then you can order these and then use them. Now, a lot of people think those should be banned. Um, Another consideration I'd like to raise is that at the end of the day, if the person wants to molest a child or satisfy a sexual urge, they will. For all we know, the doll could be the thing that prevents them from using an actual child and molesting an actual child to get that sexual satisfaction.
But I think
So,
I'm going to stop you there because I think the problem with that argument is that it's almost like a serial killer. A serial killer will first use animals and then eventually get progressively worse. So
yeah,
I think that is the problem with that argument. Is you could say a sex doll will suppress the urge, but eventually they want the real thing, and that's the problem. So you're actually making it worse for them because they will get to a point where they want the real thing. Just like when a serial killer kills animals for a while, they eventually want to see a human life. They want to kill a human life. It's a challenge. It becomes a thing. So what do you say to that?
perhaps I don't know enough about the psychology of pedophiles is still under investigation. So I'm not sure exactly how that works. All I know is that what they thought was that um, that pedophiles would watch these things and that would whet their appetite, and then they would, like you're saying, they would then progress to people. But that's actually not true. If they're watching, it means chances are they've already molested a child.
Which
So
is worse.
the only it is it's terrible. But then the only path that they have available to them is to manage the urge. And from what I've read, the only way they can manage the urge is through therapy and sometimes through drugs, and usually a combination of the two. Um, so I don't know. It's a complex issue. But again, then we're still asking the question: should we ban them? I don't know. I think it's one of those things where until we know more about what this is, where again the science of understanding pedophilia, understanding how it operates, is very much to the point, because it's not just about understanding it so that we allow it, it's about understanding it so that we can prevent it. And
That is true.
if we don't understand how those people think and how they operate, we won't know what it is that triggers them, or what it is that could help them manage it.
Well, to your point, the FBI, and there's a great series on Netflix called Headhunter, which depicts the FBI when they started to discover, and the first time they ever used the term serial killer. At the beginning and back in the day, they just thought they were random acts of killing and people were just being killed. But then
Yeah,
FBI agents eventually realized that wait, there's certain ways in which a serial killer does things. There's rituals. There's this. There's that. And then they started to investigate, and they had a psychologist on the team, and they eventually were able to profile certain serial killers, and it was people were against it. They said no, this is just killing and blah blah blah. But
yeah,
eventually, once they start to understand serial killers, they were able to maybe prevent. Unfortunately, you can't really. It's not at the stage where you can prevent a serial killer from being born or existing. But if a killing happens, maybe two or three, then you
yes,
can prevent the next one from happening because we understand how they operate. So I can
yes.
I can understand the science again. I can understand the want to understand it. I can understand that we need to understand it for those purposes. But the aspect of normalizing it, I think, is the problem because these movies and these sex dolls and the internet and technology, they're not helping to prevent future acts of molestation to kids, and that's
But
why.
but not helping to prevent is not the same as normalizing. I mean, again, I think we have to be careful about where that stuff lives. Is it still part of a very much part of an underground world? And from what I can tell from your exploration of the dark web, it is still very much underground. It's not something that's out in the open. And I'm trying to think of ways in which it maybe is out in the open. That's why I'm raising the cases of porn and androgyny and those sorts of things as examples of how we might be doing that. But I don't, for me at this point, all I can say is it's not enough for me to be convinced that we're normalizing it. I think it's a problem. I think it's a massive problem. Um, but I don't think people accept it. I don't think people are tolerant of it. And like I say, again, the issue is complicated. We need to understand pedophilia in a lot more detail. We need to understand how to help children grow up with technology so that they don't become sexualized at an age when they don't understand what that even means. So it's an incredibly complex issue.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to come to a direct answer tonight, but I think that
No.
the issues that we brought up and the topics that we brought up and the aspects that we talked about are very good, and I hope that it gets people talking. I hope that people will share this video because I think it's a very balanced video. I still stand on the side of, unfortunately, I do think to some extent media and all that other stuff and tech and all that stuff is or can be an aspect of normalizing the behavior because you can say like the fact that people have access to these kinds of things it not encourages it, but like you said, allows to whet the appetite, and that will get progressively worse. How do we combat that? That's something I don't have the answer to. But I believe in speaking about these topics because hopefully someone who watches this might start thinking about the world in a different way. Protect your children. Be careful when you give them tech. Be careful when you allow them to watch things. Raise them, just pay more attention. Now, I know this is a very delicate topic as well because, again, not everyone is a well-balanced household. You know, there are mothers that are raising their kids on their own. There are fathers that are raising their kids on their own for whatever reasons. All I'm saying is just do your best to protect your children. And I think that is a good way to probably end this stream. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I have a niece, and I'm terrified of her becoming even close to being a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, DNA, that was intense to say the least. But I'm glad we were able to have this conversation. The chats were on fire with conversation, and I thank you all for watching once again, just to make sure that everybody understands our position on the topic that is at hand. I think neither. I won't speak for you, but for me, I don't agree with the movie. I'm starting to think Queen has helped me to think that maybe it's not art because the audience has spoken. And yeah, I still think that there are aspects of our society that is normalizing it, whether it be unintentional or intentional. There are aspects that are. And the question rather is maybe we should ask the question of how do we combat this? How do we stop it? And that's unfortunately maybe a topic for another day. So yeah, I don't know if you want to give a closing on your stance.
Yeah, look, I haven't watched the movie, so I can't speak. I can't give a definitive answer about whether I think it's art or not. From what I've been told, it's been handled poorly. It was done gratuitously in an unnecessary way. I think the fact though that it has us talking about the topic is important. And from my perspective, given the evidence that I've looked at in terms of the classification of pedophilia, the especially the reaction to this movie, I'm not convinced that we're normalizing it. I think that there are pedophilia is on the rise. That's a massive problem, but I think that is partly a function of the rise of technology and how children are being sexualized because they have access to it, and that's feeding a pedophile network that's then benefiting from it. But I don't think that that's the same thing as us normalizing it. And I'm very glad that there was this very strong reaction to this film saying that that is just wrong. I can understand why people fear that this could be normalized, but luckily I don't think we're there yet. Although I think that we should just be aware that being tolerant for the sake of being tolerant is not a good thing. We need to actually have moral standards. I think the big important thing here is that with these kinds of things coming up, we're realizing how important it is for us to learn to articulate what our moral standards are and where we draw the line. So I think that's been a good outcome, if we can even call it that, because it seems like this movie was just an absolute travesty. So yeah, I'll end it there.
Well said. All right, so once again, Dioné, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me about this sensitive topic. For those of you that have watched this, thank you so much. I know we went to overtime, but it was, I don't think, the conversation needed a bit longer. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all for the super chats. I did see them. I'm sorry that I didn't get to any of the questions. I don't even know if I want to speak about this topic again. I'll give it some thought. But I think we both gave our views, and it's clear what we think, and it's clear where we stand. So remember, Dioné comes from a very scientific background. I'm more of an audience member and artist. So those are your different opinions. You guys can leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. Please like and share this video if you found it valuable. And yeah, I'll be making a proper review on the film in the few days to come. So please, if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Please give it a like. I do more conversations like this with interesting people, and Dioné will be back with me again talking about another interesting topic. And don't forget to go check her out on Let's Get Real. Sorry, Let's Get Real, upcoming show on Monday. And it's a very cool and awesome show. So yeah, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for watching, and stay safe, be kind to one another, and I flippin' mean that more now than ever. And I'll see you at the next one. Cheers. Hey guys, so if you enjoyed the show, please consider giving it a like and a share. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you're new to my channel. And if you really enjoyed the content, feel free to join and become a member. Don't forget about my fight against cancel culture. That's in the link in the description below. Support my fight against cancel culture. Go to that link and all the information is there. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching.